The mainstream media this week finally acknowledged that COVID vaccines cause harm. And there was an article in the Telegraph on the 4th of June, headed up, COVID vaccines may have helped fuel rise in excess deaths. And for our listeners, what a lot of people are not aware of, that one of the measures of whether there's issues in societies is what's called excess deaths. So they basically chart numbers of deaths. They work that against demographics, and they work out what the number of deaths there should be in a society or a country in every year. And anything above that they call excess deaths. So if you look at the years before COVID, excess deaths were relatively small. In fact, almost non-existent. They were because the population was under control. Then obviously COVID happened, excess deaths rocketed. Then after COVID, of course, there's an expectation that excess deaths would remain relatively low, go back to being low again. In fact, in theory, it should be even lower because quite a swathe of the elderly population were wiped out by COVID. The week there was a culling, wasn't there? So you would expect excess deaths to drop, but in fact, they've risen quite dramatically. And this information, by the way, is not really parlayed to the public, to our gentle listeners. It's not in the headlines. It should be in the headlines because the numbers are quite dramatic. Tens of thousands of excess deaths per year in this country alone. But what's really interesting is now that the mainstream media are starting to identify this and comment on it and linking it to COVID and COVID vaccines. So I just wondered what your observation on. I know you're kind of bored with COVID. You don't like talking about it, but
the excess deaths. First of all, we need to work out which deaths have been caused by the vaccines and which deaths have been caused by people not being able to get treatment throughout the COVID era. And a cancer would have got caught 4 years ago, would have been dealt with early. We didn't find it for 3 years later. I'm sorry, sir, now you're going to die in 6 months. So a lot of that would have happened.
Correct.
It was obvious from day one that every vaccine, every medical intervention has downsides. It may overall be a good thing and save more lives than it destroys. So it should come to no surprise to anybody that COVID vaccines will do some damage to some people and potentially kill some people, because all drugs do that. I've not seen the studies. I'm not sure how they talk about that. But it was obvious that COVID vaccines and the facts that were rushed through so quickly. What's it, normally 10 years to get a drug on the market?
I think it's 8 years.
8 years to get a drug on the market, and we did it in 6 months.
Yes.
It's like, I mean, just that's enough to make you open your eyes and go, wow.
Yeah.
I think the reason why the press now are beginning to report it is because the first few years they were complicit in this. They knew they were. And as time goes on, new reporters come through, or they start forgetting that they were involved in it, and they start looking at things again.
Yeah, and I think it's happening. And the excess deaths we're talking about, yes, you're right. Some are directly as a result of lockdown, waiting lists, but there are some that are specifically related to the vaccine. A particular thing that is now very well publicised is clotting in relatively young people, blood clots that cause as a result of the and cardiac arrhythmias as a result. There's been quite a lot of that happening. People dying, having strokes or whatever. So it's a lot of these excess deaths are directly now related to the vaccine. Right. And it's getting harder and harder to deny. But
am I right in thinking that the pharmaceutical companies did a deal with all the governments saying we will give you this vaccine and sell you this vaccine, but because we've not done clinical trials, we can never be. You take the blame for this. We cannot be sued ourselves.
Yeah. That is correct, but what's interesting is they are being sued, and they've. I think Pfizer have withdrawn one of the vaccines already.
Yeah.
I think it's Pfizer, or it may be one of the other drug companies, and but also there are class actions now starting because of vaccine harms against them. So I'm not quite sure how that's working, because I think you're right. The government did do some sorts of amnesty deal with them, but for some reason. There are people that are actually taking actions against the drug companies, so something is happening, and it's knocking money off the share. So that's one that I wanted to raise. It's quite interesting.
Did you like that video? I think you did. hit the bell, give it a big thumbs up, comment, and don't forget I'm standing for election in Oldham East and Saddleworth. So please share this video, speak to your family and friends if you live in Greater Manchester, and if you live in Oldham East and Saddleworth, make sure you vote for me. Catch you soon.